Mary Meet, Annie here. As I re-engage with the YouTube community, I wanted to keep in mind those small moments in the day that might allow us to explore our connectivity. The things that bring us together instead of the things that take us apart. I heard a phrase just today that I think was inspired by the teachings of the Buddha. It may have been the teaching of the Buddha. I want to look into it further. And the phrase is, there are 10,000 reasons to be happy. 10,000 reasons to feel joyful in the world. And I was thinking of that in relationship to you and I, especially the you and I's connected here in a sincere way, a way that leaves us curious about each other and our practices. And so I decided that in light of that, when I feel called to, I'm going to share some of the things from my personal spiritual journey. And this is a little exercise, a little working, literally, working with a capital W, a sacred undertaking that my working partner and I took on as part of our Mabon ritual today. There's only two of us. We put out energy to the universe that other women will find their way to us. But the two of us, literally co-priestessing and holding our circle together, has been a very powerful experience for me. We have a practice we've taken on the 8 spokes of the wheel, something we do for the solar holidays that can appear on the surface as if it's a word game. But it's not a word game. It's an opportunity for she and I to discuss and share and teach each other and to leave our ritual with something to take until the next turning. So what we did in our time together today will be with us until we come together the first week in November for Samhain, which we celebrate on the true cross quarter, so a bit later than most of you do. What about these celebrations of the 8 solar holidays? Do you celebrate them? Do we have that in common? Have you attempted to celebrate them and they fell flat for you? That happens for a lot of us that are stuck learning on our own. Being stuck learning on our own can be extremely powerful because we can formulate our own way forward. We can be inspired by others, but there's a lot of freedom. But there's also sometimes a feeling of lack of guidance or involvement in a group or with others, even another. Thinking of just the two of us who are gathering on the 8, in my case, that leaves us bereft of meaning for each of the 8. So there's no reason to celebrate them or celebrate them without fail then, is there? So I do challenge those of you who would like to explore the possibilities that the 8 hold for you to decide what they are for you, what they teach you when they return each year. Explore what you can take away from them. Is there a story you've been told that you like? Or can you tell a story of your gods that align to the season of the year and its teachings? Can you, and these word practices that are part of our working that I'm going to share with you, can you name the parts of yourself that relate to, that are this moment in the wheel of the year? There's importance in that because it ends up impacting our return to that place once a year. But it's also equally important because that place lives within us. At any point, we need to reach into it. These words, these phrases, these concepts that we discussed in our ritual today apply to the way we consider taking ourselves into this turning of the wheel. But they remind us that Mabon is in us, is part of us, and we can reach out to it any time. Here's how we undertake this working. It was inspired decades ago in a circle I was part of. We were all coming together from various traditions, and in fact, books on pagan studies had started coming out. Some of us, our only experience had been the books that we had found. I may have had the experience of having come up in a coven, but many of us that were coming together for that circle did not. And there was a triteness about correspondences for the solar holidays. For instance, if you go out online and you search correspondences or the meaning of Mabon, what are you going to find? Abundance, thanksgiving, release, abundance, thanksgiving, release, over and over again. I'm not saying that's not part of the season, but the power is in using perhaps those things that we find online or in books as a launching pad to explore the deeper meaning of that moment on the wheel for us. And that's where this word working, or the working of the words, as one of my mentors called it, came from. Over time, the words, the small phrases that I have aligned to this season were ones I thought of in my own meditations, or were inspired sometimes when I'd read them online, or more often for me in a book. They also came out of conversations in salons or in the actual holiday celebrations itself, where brothers and sisters said something that just lived with me powerfully. Words. It's about the words. It's about discovering the ones that have meaning for us. It's about naming things. And when it comes to our celebration at the psyche level, for the solar holidays, it's about naming the parts of ourself. So let me show you, share with you, our working of the words for our Mabon celebration today. This is a list of words in no particular order that were part of what I wrote for our rite, which is the words that have grown in my rites over the years, both public and private rites, by the way. And they include words that we added today because we have the delightful opportunity to spend time with the words and add some. So here are the words that were in our working of the words for consideration today, and then I will tell you what we did with them. Protection, prosperity, security, balance, rest, fullness of life, strength, power, gratitude, wealth, harmony, what remains, poised at the edge, memory of movement, preservation, release, dominion, authority of purpose, ingathering, salutation, determination, repletion, communion, revocation, forfeiture, faith, deference, abdication, accepting impermanence, embracing decline, relinquishment, fulfillment, nostalgia, vigil, diminishment, surrender, reckoning, the chalice of transformation and the cup of death, life-giving death, new ways of living and dying, fountains of gratitude, gifts of grace from the gods, abundance, community, the final harvest, wholeness unto ourselves, separation that follows individuation, thanksgiving, the balance of desire and need letting go. The embrace of emptiness and the suspension of expectations. That list is probably a little different than the ones you've seen if you're going on a search to find someone else's words. It's bound to be different from the words that Mabon has come to mean for you. Now, and if you don't call it Mabon and you don't celebrate it specifically, what about the season of autumn? The turning of the year. What's it teach you? What does your God or gods tell you this time of the year? What of you is the season? What of you needs to become the season to move smoothly into your own wheel, the what comes next for you? Oh, the conversations we had today. Some of these words were added today. I've never taken a word off of this list, but every year one or two seems to add itself to the list, ever expanding. What do we do with those words? Not all the words resonate with me. Every year I revisit them, that's for sure. Different ones speak to me. There's words I thought I would take off the list that at some point down the road became the most important for me. I never take anything off. I just add when I'm called to. I put a list of those words, as long as the text box will allow me to put it in below this video for you. Here's how we worked the words, the working of the words. The first is spend some time with the words. What one, right now, seems to be the most impactful word? What one spoke to you? What one leapt out of the list? Seemed to have a message for you. It doesn't matter if you know what the message is. You don't have to name it now. But amongst all those words, either as I was speaking them, of something you now can think back and remember, well, that must have been important if you still remember it after I recited that long list, or looking at the list again. What word speaks powerfully to you? That's you owning that word. You following an instinct that you need to spend time with it. There's a second part to the working of the words, and that is, and this is how we did it, all of the words are here on these pieces of paper. All of them. So I held the bowl, made my prayer to the goddess on behalf of my working partner. It asks that. One of the phrases here was gracious gifts, I should say, gifts of grace from the gods. And the opportunity the gods present us through the lessons they teach us in whatever way they make themselves known to us, that allow us to be in full and balanced relationship to our life. And that's referred to in that list as the gifts of grace from the gods. These slips of paper, innocuous as they seem, in this bowl, are gifts of grace from the gods. So I held this bowl in my hands, thought about my partner, who I love and am very, very close to. And I called out to Goddess with my own spoken prayer on the spot, searching for the Goddess to work through me to select a word or a phrase for her. And she did the same thing. She held the bowl and offered a prayer up to the Goddess and picked a word which she passed on to me. So you end up with two words in the working. The one that seemed to just talk to you for some reason, whether you knew why or you didn't. And then the ones that the gods gifted you with. So what do you do with these words? Well, let me give you an example of my words. The word that was resonating with me was a combination of all the words that felt like a wholeness. The feeling of everything of myself coming together, that I was, all my pieces at this time of the year were coming in closer together in creating who I was. That wholeness is separate from whatever happens in my life outside of this. Wholeness was the word I chose for myself. I don't know yet whether I chose it because I feel like it's a word of power for me, reflecting where I am, or whether I'm being told that my bits are still a bit scattered out there. I need to call them back. That's what my work is after this ritual. And my other word, the one that my working partner chose for me by picking it out of the bowl, was what remains. Well, the work we're supposed to do with these words is to decide if they are currently a word of personal power for us that we can embrace and take into the dark time, or whether there's something left over from the previous seasons of the year that we need to explore to see if we need it, to see if we have it and we've forgotten. A remembering at the spiritual level. So I was a little stuck at first on mine, which was what remains. The question tells you to consider what remains of what remains. However, it gave me a pretty clear insight in the meditations I did later on today that I need to spend some time, because more than likely the gift of grace the gods gave me with what remains is I'm just not being honest about some things that need to be taken care of. So, the idea is to pick a word that you like a lot and then have a word gifted to you. You can do that by printing out those things in the text box and making something for yourself along the lines of this. I would like to say, if you're watching this in 2016 from Mabon, you are more than welcome to, in the comments, let me know you'd like me to pick a word for you. Then you decide what to do with it from there. Is it a strength? Is it something you have evolved to in the turning of the year? Is it something you need to be aware of that is such an important part of who you are and who you will be as you head into the dark time of the year? Is it something you need to complete, to go in search of before you take the journey into the dark? Is it something that you kind of forgot that you had all along? Live with the two words. We will be spending, my working partner and I, time with those two words until our Samhain ritual. We don't share anymore after the fact. We share a lot in our rituals, but what happens outside, the living in accord, which is such a powerful part of ritual, the part of ritual that does not end, we won't be sharing that. Especially at this time of year, it's such a personal journey. But we're not going to let either one of our words go away or let ourselves drift away from those words, because there's something about both of those gifts, the one we instinctively knew and the ones the gods gave us, that needs to evolve to a further maturity from now until Samhain. So I invite you, if it interests you, let me know. I'll gladly pull a word for you. I'll simply be holding this in my hand, offering an intent that some higher intelligence, some higher love guides my hand to pick a word that will, if not at the moment, have meaning to you the more you spend with it. So I wanted to leave this in consideration of Mabon. I will go back and look to see. I've done one or two previous videos, and if I find them, I will link you to them below. But I wanted to, because we mentioned it today, and it just took me back to such a wonderful place. My dearly beloved mentor, Rachel, who spent the better part of 10 years working with me, had a triumvirate of considerations for this time of the year that was often part of the work that we did as a coven and sent off to do individually. They sound at first a little bit highfalutin when it comes to the words. I know they did to me, at least the first time I heard them. She was so well educated, I thought she was yet again talking over my head. And let me read them to you. And then I'll tell you, in any simpler view of the words, the power they've held for me ever since were aligned to Mabon for me. The words are revocation, abdication, and relinquishment. So at the simplest level, as a power of this season, especially as I relate to it, revocation. It's the idea that there's been a tide of your life that has brought you to this point, this pinnacle of the year. In one of the poems you read today, the threshold of the evening of the year was how it was referenced. It was a poem from Joyce Rupp, I think. Anyway, there's a movement in your life this year, in your life in its entirety, that's come to this moment, this very moment. And there is a sense of some of the things that have become part of that snowball of your life, or the rock that's gathering moss that rolls through your life, that some of that has to be turned back. Acknowledge what's brought you to a certain place. And you're aware that some of that stuff that comes along should have dropped by the wayside along the way. Richard used revocation for that. You know, that's what the intent of it is. To take some time to be in the season, to be honest with what seems to have been tagging along for who knows how long, maybe this year, maybe your life, that it's best left to a time in your past. It should have stayed behind you, but it didn't. That was the power of revocation in this case, as she taught it. The next thing is abdication. Stepping away and no longer being connected to that. It was a responsibility, if not a burden, that you took along with you. You owned it. You owned it. But her next step after revocation of abdication was deny your connection to it, eliminate your responsibility to it, step away. Step away from it. And then her third suggestion for the flow of who we become as we pass through the season of Mabon was relinquishment. That honored the fact that if we understand what has been tagging along, that no longer serves us, and we make a statement, a declaration, a firm stance that we take, no more. I'm not part of that. It is not part of me any longer. I step down, I step away, I move forward, but I am no longer in relationship with that. Relinquishment is where you are at that point. You didn't really acknowledge what came with you and separate yourself from it. If you don't feel it here, it's kind of a game up in there until that point. Relinquishment is experiencing the emotional feeling of being separated from something you were so attached to. Maybe even felt you couldn't do without it. But a new wisdom came into your soul that told you, no more. Relinquishment, if it's not really gone from your heart and your soul, if it isn't just an intellectual exercise, it didn't really go away. The momentum that took you here and what came that no longer serves you, your separation from that, and your being with that at a place of, it could be love, it could be acceptance, it could be forgiveness, the power of the emotion after you declare no more, that's your true release. So I wanted to share that with you. I'd love to know what you think about this. Does it feel like word games to you? Can you see the value in this kind of thing? We're doing it in our little circle of 2. Every one of the 8 now. For me, the importance is It's a call to attention for me to focus. It's also something that lives with me through the turning. It's not a once and done in ritual or in meditation that night or the next day. It's an indication of work that has to be done, in my case, around wholeness and what remains before arriving to Samhain Eve. Let me know if you want me to pull a word for you. I wish you all mirth and reverence. Merry part.